All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're uncovering the foundational years of one of the world's most recognizable and influential entrepreneurs. And we are going to focus intensely on the unvarnished reality of his early rise. This isn't some fairy tale story of overnight glory. It's a meticulously structured look at the actual building blocks of massive innovation. If you really want to understand how monumental businesses are forged from the ground up, you've got to look at the struggles, the calculated risks, and the raw resilience that set the stage.
I mean, just imagine it. You're rejected, you're doubted, you are literally on the verge of bankruptcy, only to eventually build companies that completely transform entire global industries. We're talking electric vehicles, space exploration, artificial intelligence, online payments, the whole shebang. How is that actually possible? We so often look at the finished product, the incredible success, and we completely forget about the brutal, doubt-filled beginnings. So throughout this explainer, we're going to extract the core business lessons from those early days. We're keeping it focused on the facts, the resilience, and the real gritty mechanics of entrepreneurship.
Chapter 1. The Boy from Pretoria. Because to really grasp the scale of what comes later, we've got to start right at the beginning in South Africa.
Now, we're not just talking about a kid who kind of liked to read, right? We're looking at an intense, almost obsessive passion for books, combined with a very deep, early interest in science and computers. He didn't sit around waiting for a teacher. He actually taught himself programming at a super young age. And here's the kicker. He didn't just learn to code for the fun of it. He applied it. He built and actually sold his first computer game called Blastar. This early drive to not just consume information, but to actively build and sell a product, that's a massive clue. It's a definitive trait we're going to see repeated on much, much larger scales.
Which brings us to Chapter 2, Taking Calculated Risks. Leaving the familiar behind to move to North America was a monumental leap into the unknown. And you can literally track the sheer hustle required in his timeline. Growing up in South Africa, then packing up for Canada in his late teens, working completely random odd jobs just to scrape by and make things work. From there, it's early college at Queen's University, which eventually leads to a pivotal pivot in his mid-college years, transferring down to the University of Pennsylvania. That is where he dives into physics and economics. Think about that combination for a second. It perfectly blends an understanding of how the physical universe operates with how human markets function. It's a fascinating blueprint for an entrepreneur, building this incredible foundation of diverse experiences and relentless forward momentum.
But right here is where the concept of calculated risk gets cranked all the way up to 10. After all that academic groundwork, he actually gets accepted into a PhD program at Stanford University. That's a path that guarantees a very high level of safety, prestige, and a comfortable life. And what does he do? He walks away. He leaves the secure academic bubble to dive headfirst into the chaotic, totally unknown world of business. It's a massive risk, obviously, but as you'll see, it was driven by an incredible sense of timing regarding the broader technology landscape.
And that impeccable timing lands us right at Chapter 3, the birth of his first major company, Zip2, right at the very dawn of the 1990s internet boom. Now, the reality of building a startup in those days, incredibly gritty. We are talking about sleeping under the desk, having to shower at the local YMCA because your office is literally your apartment, surviving on a razor-thin budget, and facing just grueling skepticism from investors. But look at the ultimate outcome of that brutal phase. Compaq steps in and acquires Zip2. Boom. This acquisition is his first major financial success. It's a textbook example, right in front of us, of how extreme input can eventually yield extreme output.
So, what's the core business lesson from the Zip2 era? It's surprisingly simple. Persistence. It is that raw ability to just keep working incredibly hard, pushing directly through extreme budget constraints and overwhelming investor doubt to hit your goal. Early success in the business world is almost never just handed out. It's born purely out of persistence and a stubborn willingness to do the unglamorous hard work required to solve a real problem. This is an absolutely vital takeaway for anyone studying high-level entrepreneurship.
Armed with that first big win, he doesn't just kick back and relax. Welcome to Chapter 4, Revolutionizing Online Payments, where he spots a massive, archaic inefficiency in traditional banking.
And this vision evolves really fast. First up, he launches X.com, banking entirely on this highly ambitious vision for the future of online finance. But markets are ruthless and highly competitive. So a strategic decision is made to merge with a major rival company called Confinity. Through that merger and just nonstop continuous iteration, this combined powerhouse entity morphs into the absolute financial giant we know today as PayPal. It's a total masterclass in how to adapt a grand vision through incredibly smart strategic partnerships.
Now, to be totally fair, it's important to note that this journey wasn't exactly perfectly smooth. Building a revolutionary product with a bunch of other brilliant, strong-willed founders, it's going to lead to friction. There were some serious internal leadership disagreements and heavy battles along the way. But the real key takeaway here is that all those internal conflicts simply could not stop the underlying momentum of the product. The solution they were building was so necessary for the internet revolution that the company just kept surging forward, regardless of the turbulence happening at the top.
And that unstoppable momentum culminated in an absolute game changer. eBay acquires PayPal. Now, this isn't just a successful exit. It is the monumental financial engine that changes everything. The acquisition provided him with significant, world-changing capital. Suddenly, the scrappy entrepreneur who was sleeping under his desk just a few years prior, he now has the personal resources to fund almost any wild vision he can possibly imagine.
Which leads us perfectly into Chapter 5, the ultimate entrepreneurial vision. For a normal person, a massive payout like that is the moment you retire, buy an island, and just relax, right? But his story takes a completely radical turn.
He takes this brand new fortune and channels it straight into the most incredibly difficult, capital-intensive industries imaginable: space exploration, electric vehicles, renewable energy. Think about this. At the time, conventional business wisdom basically shouted that these industries were totally impossible for a startup to disrupt. They were dominated by governments and massive century-old monopolies. Yet, he didn't view them as impossible barriers. He just saw them as the absolute necessary next problems that had to be solved for humanity's future.
And this brings us to what might be the ultimate business lesson about pure ambition. Most successful entrepreneurs stop after achieving financial freedom. Elon Musk chose to risk almost everything to pursue even bigger goals. True disruption, the kind that alters history, doesn't come from seeking comfort. It comes from an insatiable drive to push the boundaries of what's possible, especially when you have absolutely everything to lose.
So, we're left with this massive, looming question. What actually happens when you take your entire, newly acquired fortune and bet the whole shebang on companies like SpaceX and Tesla? How in the world do you navigate the inevitable and repeated failures, the terrifying financial cash crunches, and the sheer pressure of trying to build rockets and electric cars at the exact same time? Well, I'm going to leave you to ponder that provocative thought, because the line between catastrophic failure and extraordinary success is razor thin, and that is exactly what we will unpack next time.
Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's dive right into this, shall we? Today we're unpacking a truly extraordinary business blueprint. We're looking at a journey that totally reshaped how we think about innovation and, honestly, wealth creation itself. We're going to examine how one massive financial exit, the sale of PayPal, didn't lead to some quiet, comfortable retirement. Instead, it became the foundation for completely revolutionizing multiple global industries. We'll be exploring the massive achievements, the crushing setbacks, and the highly unique mindset required to actually pull this whole thing off.
All right, let's kick things off with Chapter 1, the ultimate all-in bet. Imagine you've just sold a wildly successful tech company and you have more than enough cash to retire comfortably for the rest of your life. That's exactly the critical crossroads Elon Musk faced. On one hand, you have the safe road of immense personal comfort, but on the other hand, you have the path of extreme, almost unthinkable financial risk. And this brilliantly illustrates his choice. Instead of safe investments, notice how that massive slice of his fortune went directly into high-risk companies. He poured almost all of his wealth into starting ventures in spaces where industry experts firmly believed failure was literally the only possible outcome.
So that brings up a really fascinating question for us to chew on. Why on earth would you risk it all on doomed industries? I mean, what kind of highly unusual mindset does it take to make such a colossal, counterintuitive gamble with your own money? To look at rockets and electric cars, sectors that are absolutely notorious for bankrupting newcomers, and decide, yep, that is where you will place your entire fortune. It requires an incredible amount of long-term thinking and an immense, almost superhuman tolerance for risk.
Which brings us to Chapter 2, Defying Gravity with SpaceX.
Now, his first major gamble wasn't just for the sheer thrill of space travel. The monumental business goal here was fundamentally reducing the cost of space launches to open up a brand new era of exploration. But man, look at years 2 through 4. This era was completely defined by extreme financial pressure and some highly public, absolutely heartbreaking rocket failures. We're talking millions of dollars literally exploding in the sky, pushing the company to the absolute brink of bankruptcy. But persistence paid off. That breakthrough successful launch of the Falcon 1, it proved their engineering worked, completely saved the company, and paved the way to securing vital NASA contracts. That was the exact lifeline SpaceX needed to survive and scale.
In the core innovation that saved them, it completely upended traditional aerospace economics. Historically, this industry was just crippled by prohibitive costs simply because rockets were single-use. They were flown once and then discarded into the ocean. It's like throwing away an airplane after one flight. But by engineering reusable boosters, rockets that could launch, land, and actually fly again, SpaceX created entirely new commercial economics. It was a total game changer that completely rewrote the commercial space industry's traditional business model.
Moving right along to Chapter 3, the electric road of Tesla. So, while he's battling gravity, he was simultaneously taking on a century-old internal combustion engine culture that completely dominated the world. But it is essential to be historically accurate here. Musk wasn't actually the sole founder of Tesla. His actual role in the genesis of the company was as a vital early investor in Catalyst. He provided the crucial make-or-break financial backing the company desperately needed in its earliest days to develop their technology. It was only later on that he officially stepped into the leadership role to really guide its explosive growth.
And let me tell you, building an electric vehicle company from scratch is incredibly complex. Guiding that growth meant navigating a totally chaotic path filled with compounding, overlapping challenges. For starters, Tesla faced widespread production delays that constantly threatened the company's output and reputation. On top of that, they were up against fierce competition from heavily funded, established legacy automakers who controlled the global market. Add to that the intense internal financial struggles as they tried to scale up their massive gigafactories and production lines. It was a lot. Yet, by pushing through these compounding obstacles, Tesla eventually managed to transform from a struggling startup into one of the world's most valuable automakers.
Let's look at the bigger picture in Chapter 4, an expanding technological vision.
Because beyond just rockets and cars, a much broader, highly interconnected master plan for humanity's future was being constructed behind the scenes. Whether we're talking about solar energy initiatives, deep research into neural technology, cutting-edge artificial intelligence projects, or entirely new infrastructure and transportation concepts, these incredibly diverse ventures actually share a single unifying purpose. Every single initiative fits neatly into a cohesive, long-term master plan to solve massive, large-scale, global technological challenges and basically remove the bottlenecks that could hold human progress back.
Of course, ambition at this scale doesn't come without friction. Chapter 5. The Price of Bold Leadership.
Disrupting multiple global industries generates an enormous amount of friction. Public leadership at this level brings a very distinct dual dynamic. On one side, you have this deep admiration from supporters who praise the bold leadership and really celebrate the high-risk decision-making that clearly drives rapid innovation. But that is contrasted equally against intense scrutiny from critics. They raise valid concerns regarding unpredictable public communication styles and worry deeply over this extreme tolerance for risk. Navigating this crazy dynamic of intense support and heavy scrutiny, well, that is simply the neutral reality of public leadership when you are actively trying to change established systems.
Which brings us to our final takeaway. Chapter 6, Blueprint of a Billionaire. So the crucial point is, how do we actually apply this? The goal here isn't to just copy one person's exact path. Doing that is virtually impossible anyway. The real value is in adopting the underlying mindset through these timeless business principles. It requires thinking long-term to solve truly meaningful problems. It means maintaining a commitment to lifelong learning, especially in new fields. And just like those brutal early days of SpaceX, you have to accept that setbacks and failures are a mandatory part of the innovation process, as long as you're taking calculated, not reckless risks to build products that create genuine value. And above all else, ideas are great, but relentless resilience and execution are literally everything. To wrap up our explainer today, I want to leave you with this powerful thought. This whole journey hasn't just been a look at how someone built incredible wealth. At its core, it is fundamentally a story about ambition, persistence, innovation, and the willingness to challenge industries that many believed could never change. So I'll leave you with this question to ponder as you go about your day. When you look around your own world, your own career, or your own industry, what are the supposedly unchangeable systems or totally outdated rules that you could challenge today? Thanks so much for learning with us, and as always, keep questioning the impossible.